In this episode of the vlog, we're talking about leaders being listeners. And when I say listeners, I mean podcast listeners. You might have heard the saying, leaders are learners and leaders are readers. Those things are true. Leaders are learners and leaders are readers. And today it's hard for leaders to read as much as we'd like to and soak in the knowledge that we'd like to. But the opportunity that we have today through podcasting is tremendous. You see, we can consume podcasts while we're on the go. We can consume podcasts in between meetings or while we're in the car or while we're exercising or mowing the grass. There's unlimited opportunities for us to consume content, and the great news is there's such great content available to us as leaders through podcast. Other great leaders are creating really good content for leaders, and I want to share with you in this podcast my top 5 recommended podcasts for leaders. The first podcast I want to recommend for every leader is the Entree Leadership Podcast with Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey and his team do such a great job in this podcast, pulling in other great leaders and interviewing them, taking wisdom and insights from leaders from every industry and every size organization. This podcast is very practical and just really great content from an interview style format for you as a leader. And so I can't recommend enough the Dave Ramsey Leadership Podcast. The second podcast I want to recommend to you is the Groeschel Leadership Podcast. Craig Groeschel shares his insights from practically of what it's like to lead a large organization, as well as some big picture leadership opportunities when it comes to casting vision and communicating in a large organization and as a leader. Now, one of the practical insights I remember learning is how he doesn't go out to lunch. He has lunch in his office, and sometimes he'll have somebody join him, but the amount of time that saves to help him be more efficient as a leader is really helpful, from the time of traveling to a restaurant to ordering to waiting for the food to come. When he has his lunch right there in the office, the amount of time saved is really tremendous. Little small tips like that, and then big tips on how to cast vision and really how to communicate vision and get people on board with the vision. These are insights that every leader needs to move further and get there faster as a leader. Now, the third podcast that I highly recommend, and the one I've listened to the longest, is the Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast. Andy Stanley is a great leader, very insightful and practical in his leadership styles. And in this podcast, they take a clip from one of Andy's messages, share a portion of that, and then they interview Andy to really get more insights out of that topic in really practical application in every podcast through, I'd go back years on this Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast, and the wisdom you will gain from this podcast is so tremendous. And these podcasts are free. They're free. So go download the Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast today. The third podcast is probably the most fun and probably what I've listened to the most because there's so many episodes, is the Gary Vaynerchuk audio experience. Now, this started as the Ask Gary V show, and it has now expanded with all kinds of different content pieces, from keynotes to interviews with his interns at VaynerMedia. Gary Vaynerchuk is one of my favorite leaders when it comes to marketing and social media. Gary Vaynerchuk is a really charismatic communicator. He will inspire you as a leader as he shares his entrepreneurship insights in leading VaynerMedia and seeing just tremendous growth in that organization, as well as technology insights, as he's an investor in several technology groups. And then he's also a social media strategist, and then really the insights he gives into how to practically use social media as a leader. It's so insightful, so I can't recommend Gary Vaynerchuk's podcast to you enough. And then the last podcast I want to recommend to you is Entrepreneur on Fire with John Lee Dumas. This is a really inspiring podcast for any entrepreneur. So if you're a starter, so whether you're in a nonprofit or for-profit side of things, if you're a starter, you're going to be inspired by this podcast as John Lee Dumas interviews other entrepreneurs and really how they help to start these organizations, when they were in kind of that desperate mode to when their organization began to grow or they begin to overcome certain hurdles. This podcast is so inspiring, and really it's so practical and valuable, especially for those on the online side. So really heavy in online development and online entrepreneurs, but really he does dig into all levels of entrepreneurship and organizational starting when it comes to leadership. So I want to give you a bonus tip, and then I want to share 3 podcasts that I'm a part of that I'd encourage you to also go listen to. So when it comes to practical tip around consuming podcasts, you can actually speed up the way you listen to podcasts. So you can actually put it on 1.5 speed or even double time speed as you listen to this podcast. This will allow you to consume more. Now, I choose not to do that because I really like to listen to the podcast in real time of what it actually sounds like. I think you get inflection. You maybe experience the passion a little bit more in that. But if you listen to it double time, you can consume twice as much. So when you're going to want to take away practical tips, double time speed is a great way to really consume a lot in a little bit of time. So that's my tip for you when it comes to podcasting. So the 3 podcasts that I'm a part of that I want to share with you are first, the Social Media Church podcast. This is a podcast I've been doing for about 2 years, helping ministry leaders maximize social media. So if you're a ministry leader or you know of one, I hope you'll listen to the Social Media Church podcast. The second podcast is the Awesome Marriage podcast. This is a podcast that I co-host with Dr. Kim Kimberling and Christina Dotson. Dr. Kim Kimberling is a marriage counselor of over 20 years. And so his insights as a marriage counselor are so valuable. And so we have a conversation about various marriage topics with him. So if you know a married couple, it's a great podcast for you. And then the third podcast is the Emotionally Healthy Leadership podcast with Pete Scazzaro. Pete Scazzaro is a hero of mine and a mentor, and his insights from writing the book Emotionally Healthy Spirituality and Emotionally Healthy Leader, along with many other books, he shares in this podcast, and it's directly for leaders of what does it mean to be an emotionally healthy leader. And so this podcast comes out about once a month. I'd go back into the archives and dig up some of the old content because he's been doing this for years, and there's just gold within this podcast. And so these are still coming out on a regular basis moving forward, but the archives that are sitting there from years of doing podcasts are so worth you digging back into. So those are the 3 podcasts that I'm a part of, and I hope you'll listen to. So thank you so much for listening to this vlog. If you have other podcasts that you would recommend for leaders, if you would comment below, let us know what those podcasts are. I want to listen to them. I want to know about them. Share those in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching this vlog.